Committee member. Clerk has advised we do have a quorum, and those appearing so we're ready to begin. Meeting number, well, I'm getting a terrible echo in my
87.
Yeah, but I'm getting a terrible echo in my earpiece. Back. So welcome to meeting number 87 of the House of Commons Standing Committee on Human Resources, Skills, Social Development, and the Status of Persons with Disabilities. Pursuant to Standing Order 1082, the committee resumes its study on the implications of artificial intelligence technologies for the Canadian labour force. Today's meeting is taking place in a hybrid format, meaning some people are participating by Zoom. I want to advise those in the room as well as on Zoom, you can choose to speak in the official language of your choice. You have interpretation services available using your headset in the room, as well as the world icon at the bottom of your surface. Click on it and choose the official language of your choice. If there is an interruption in translation services, please get my attention. By using the raised hand icon or raise your hand in the room. I'll suspend while it is being corrected. I would also want to remind those in the room, please keep your earpiece away from the mic because it creates popping, which is detrimental to hearing of the translators. Also speak slowly and clearly for the benefit of our translation services. For today's meeting, the first hour is for witnesses on this particular study. We have with us today Ryan Smith, Divisional Director of Planning and Development by video conference from the City of Kelowna. From the Competition Bureau of Canada in the room, we have Anthony DeRochier. DeRochier? Or DeRoche?
It's good enough.
No, it's got to be right. DeRoche. Okay. And Trevor McKay, Deputy Commissioner, Digital Enforcement. We have one witness that still has, we have not been able to connect with. We'll see how it goes. So to begin today's meeting, we'll begin with an opening 5-minute statement by Mr. Smith. You have the floor, Mr. Smith.
Good morning. In Kelowna, our experience with the use of artificial intelligence goes back about 2.5 years. We wrote a grant application to the provincial government with the aim of using some artificial intelligence tools to help us improve our planning and development processes. And we were successful in that grant application, and that grant application involved a partnership with Microsoft and the use of their artificial intelligence technologies. And again, the goal was probably twofold, to improve our development processes in Kelowna, as well as provide better customer service to those in our planning and development community, and learn where else we could use it. This isn't our first use of the tool in Kelowna. We have a number of different, we call them chatbots that are artificial intelligence based. I am not an IT person. I'm a city planner. And so my depth of understanding of the technical side of it is low, but I am an administrator and do look after a workforce of 85 people who will all soon have access to the tools that we're creating. And so what we've created is a sort of a front-end concierge service to those looking to use our planning and development services in Kelowna. And that will help the average person who does not understand what they would need to make a building permit application, but help them enter our process of making a building permit application to make it more accessible. So everything they would need to know to make a building permit application. And we're hoping that when we make that process easier and are able to answer more questions with the use of our artificial intelligence chatbot tool, that we'll have a less burden on our staff, our frontline staff, who regularly process building and development applications, who are overwhelmed and under-resourced. And the second aspect of it is that we also have a high turnover with our frontline staff, and their knowledge base is not increasing because of that. A lot of them are, within 6 months or a year on the job, and they don't have the breadth of understanding that a clerk who had been on the job for 20 years would have. And so the use of the artificial intelligence tools that we're developing will also help them provide feedback more quickly with fewer clicks. We do also participate in the ethical side of the use of AI, and our IT director has been involved at the provincial level in developing policy related to that side of the rollout of artificial intelligence and our local government processes.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Smith. We will now go to who's speaking for the Competition Bureau. Okay, you have the floor, Mr. DeRoche.
Bonjour, Monsieur le Président et membres du comité.
Good morning, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. Thank you for inviting me to appear before you today. As you study the impact of technology and artificial intelligence on the labor force in Canada, I am Anthony Rocher, Deputy Commissioner of the Competition Promotion Branch, and I'm joined by Trevor McKay, Deputy Commissioner of the Digital Enforcement and Intelligence Branch. I would like to provide a quick overview of the Competition Bureau's role and our work with respect to artificial intelligence. The Bureau is an independent law enforcement agency that protects and promotes competition for the benefit of Canadian consumers and businesses. We administer and enforce Canada's Competition Act, a law of general application that applies to every sector of the economy.
The Act involves investigating and addressing abuses of market power, anti-competitive mergers, price fixing, bid rigging, and deceptive marketing practices. We also advocate to all levels of government in Canada for pro-competitive government rules and regulations. Competition is vital to our economy. It drives lower prices and innovation while fueling economic growth. For Canadian workers, maintaining and encouraging competition among employers results in higher wages and salaries, as well as better benefits and employment opportunities for employees. With respect to AI, the Bureau is working hard to keep pace with its growing application in everyday life. There are important questions that need to be asked about the entrenchment of dominant players who control the critical inputs that fuel AI. There's also the very real risk posed by anti-competitive mergers or deliberately unethical conduct of these advanced tools to deceive consumers. We recently created a new digital enforcement and intelligence branch to better equip the Bureau for the challenges and complexities of the digital age. The branch is driving our deeper understanding of competition issues around emerging technologies, including AI. We're actively connecting with experts and learning a lot quickly. Soon, the Bureau will publish a discussion paper for consultation with the public that is focused on competition considerations related to AI. That work and the feedback we will receive will continue to hone our thinking even further. Partnerships are vital too. Last June, the Bureau joined forces with the Office of the Privacy Commissioner of Canada and the CRTC to create the Canadian Digital Regulators Forum. Through the creation of this forum, the three agencies will exchange best practices, conduct research, and collaborate on matters of common interest, including with respect to AI, which we are prioritizing in our first year. Before fielding your questions, I would note that the law requires the Bureau to conduct investigations in private and keep confidential the information that we have. This obligation may prevent us from discussing some past or current investigations. We appreciate the opportunity to appear before you today to discuss our work, and we look forward to your questions. Thank you.
Monsieur Desroches.
Perfect.
Are we going to try?
Let's try.
Okay, we have the third witness that has appeared, but we have not been able to do an official sound test. So, Mr. Carrier, Monsieur Carrier, if you want to begin, if the sound quality is okay for the interpreters, you'll be able to continue, but if not, unfortunately, you'll not be able to participate verbally in the meeting. So do you want to begin with your opening statement with a few words? No, you're on mute. Monsieur Carrier, we'll have to proceed. We will, technical people will get back to you. We may have to reschedule you. Unfortunately, we cannot hear you. So technical staff will reach out to you and we'll decide how we go. Thank you. So now we'll begin with the first round of questioning, beginning with Ms. Gray. Ms. Gray, you have 6 minutes.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to all of the witnesses for being here today. My first questions are for Mr. Smith, and thank you for your opening statement regarding some of the work that the City of Kelowna is doing on AI. I know that Kelowna often punches above our weight in many ways, and here's another example. One of the things I wanted to ask you was, from your experience in implementing this new AI technology, and I know that it's new, the one that you had explained at the municipality. What sort of processes do you think governments should be using to identify opportunities within government departments and within government services for potential opportunities of utilizing AI?
Thank you for the question, MP Gray. One of the things that we've been doing is tracking through a lot of our frontline services the number of calls and interactions that we frequently get, the everyday and the repetitive that we felt could be answered differently. And so that really drove the development of this tool. Our frontline staff probably answered the question, can I put a secondary suite in my house, or can I build a carriage house on my property dozens of times a day? Different iterations of the same question. And so the development of this tool was really based on, if we could free up those staff from answering that question in different ways, that many times a day, what could they be doing instead? Could they be doing higher value work that would process permits for housing more quickly?
Great, thank you. And I think you partially answered my next question, but do you believe that implementing AI within certain applications can make government more efficient and in particular reduce red tape?
We definitely do here in Kelowna. We think that there's, I don't think we're going to be eliminating full positions, but through efficiencies that we believe AI will bring in our processes, we could free up, 20 or 30% of 5 positions doing something similar, and that would, result in a full position that we could reallocate to a different task. So yes, we believe there's some efficiencies, and the other side of that is that we struggle to bring on new staff that are qualified, and we believe that this will also help delay the need for extra staff as we grow.
Thank you. There was a report from the Organization of Economic Cooperation and Development, the OECD, which lists Canada's productivity as having fallen far behind peer countries and projects Canada will have the worst economic performance among advanced countries over the next decade, going all the way to 2060. And the OECD predicts labor utilization will drag on Canada's GDP per capita growth. We actually had a representative from the Council of Canadian Innovators here before this committee recently on this study, and he talked about how low productivity quote, not being normal for advanced economies, when we were referring to Canada, unquote. And he discussed if we're not a productive economy compared to our neighbors, it gives Canada less wealth, less options, and less resources for dealing with important challenges. So this is important because productivity is relative with standards of living, meaning Canadian standards of living will continue to decrease compared to other countries. So why I bring this up is some of our biggest employers across Canada are governments. And so do you believe that AI can potentially be used by governments as a tool to try to increase productivity and steer this decreased standard of living trajectory that Canada is currently on?
Yeah, thank you for the question. We certainly do believe that. And I'll give an example, again, related to our housing and housing industry in Kelowna. If our AI tools mean that we can permit housing, faster with less red tape, and that's the idea behind the AI tools that we're developing as they continue to grow and we continue to test and implement. If we can permit 20 or 30% more housing a year, that not only benefits locals who are trying to access housing, but the development and construction industry who can really rely on a stable permitting environment, and which will drive more investment through our local economy.
Is there any type of training or upgrading that you're seeing may be required by municipal staff? And this could be either on the IT side or maybe on the operations side, and to administer different applications. And based on what you've seen so far, is there easy access to those types of training for municipal staff?
This is so new. I think the training tools are just being developed. And I would say that municipal staff are starting to get on board. We're offering our own internal training. We've just introduced a Microsoft tool that gives us the ability to use a little bit of AI help when we're generating emails and doing analysis in Microsoft Excel or building PowerPoint presentations. And the other side to that, though, is the public-facing side and their use of AI and the language that you need to use to access to give it commands is a little bit different than the language you would use to search on Google. And so I think that we're developing our tools so that you don't have to use that language right now, and it will give the public in Kelowna the time to learn that language, and we'll adapt our tools over time too.
Thank you, Ms. Gray and Mr. Smith. And Mr. Coteau for 6 minutes.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and thank you to our witnesses who are here today. I'll start off with Mr. Smith as well. Mr. Smith, was there an actual city that you looked at to build examples off of an intelligent city like yours? And I know you're striving to make improvements, but is there a go-to city that would be used as an example when discussing the integration of AI into their everyday use?
Thank you for the question. There actually isn't right now. We're kind of and doing what we're doing is getting quite a bit of recognition. And I was actually in Ottawa last week talking to the Home Builders of Canada about what we're doing in the tool that we're trying to develop. And again, we're not completely finished the development of the tool because it's so complex to implement it with planning and development journeys. But we've finished portions of those journeys related to parts of our permitting process. And we believe that we'll be the ones that other people copy if we can successfully launch the whole project.
Do you have plans to expand that, to monetize that service, or to allow it to be used in other municipalities? Is there a long-term vision for it?
Yeah, our commitment to the province of British Columbia when we received the grant for the tool is that we would document our development process for the tool and share that for free with any municipality in British Columbia who was interested, because it is a government-funded project, not a taxpayer-funded project in Kelowna. It's funded by the provincial government. And so the next step for us is we're actually in the documentation phase right now. And we have sat down with other cities like the city of Vancouver, for example, and shared our journey. And we hope that it will help other cities improve their front-end processes related to the delivery of homes.
Can you put an actual dollar value to what the savings, for example, the chat box is brought into the city? Is there an actual dollar value that can be articulated at this point?
There isn't a dollar value that I would say that could be articulated at this point. We launched the chatbot on October 3rd of this year. And so we're about a month into implementation, and we're tracking the data behind that. But every week, the journeys that you can take through that chatbot for different parts of our permitting process grows. And to give an example, we also just used our AI to digitize the building code in British Columbia so that our staff that do building code related checks can access that rather than flipping through a binder of 600 pages. They can query the AI tool that's learned the BC building code and fire code and plumbing code and get instantaneous interpretations. And so the monetary value is going to be hard to estimate up front. Our contribution in staff time to the project so far is about a couple $100,000. Our investment from the government of British Columbia is about $350,000. And the in-kind support from Microsoft is about $350,000 to this point. Kelowna has just received our Housing Accelerator Fund grant, and we thank the government for that. And we will be allocating a portion of that towards advancing this tool as well.
I think that's great, and the fact that your municipality has dedicated itself to adopting this type of technology to better provide services for the citizens you represent. I think it's great, and I think it's an example other municipalities should be looking at. So I just want to say thank you. The last question I will ask is, there's ethical and value statements that I would say that organizations like yours have to agree to before engaging in this type of journey. In your strategic plan, were there some overarching guiding principles, visions, value statements, ethical considerations that you hold dear to the process?
Our sort of driving vision at the City of Kelowna is to be a city of the future, and we try and make sure that runs through any project we take on. But we also believe the transparency of the tools we're using is very, very important. And if, for example, in the last few years, you're engaging in our development process is completely transparent, so that if our staff are given a set of plans for an architect to evaluate, the public can also see those plans online as well at the same time. There's nothing hidden. And that flows through our new AI chatbot too. So as AI answers questions in that chatbot, we do have a disclaimer below any answer that the AI gives to advise the public that their response is generated by AI. So they're aware that the response they've gotten isn't a personal response, it's an AI response. And then we also every day track the logs of our AI responses from the day before to make sure the performance is up to standards we believe are appropriate in terms of quality. So we're not giving out bad information. And if we have given out bad information, that we correct the spots where the AI is looking for the response to questions that are coming in.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Coteau. You had a few seconds left. Just before, Monsieur Carrière will be invited back for Wednesday with the proper headset. So he will not be appearing this panel representing Unifor. Madame Chabot, pour 6 minutes, s'il vous plaît.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. I want to thank our witnesses for being present. Mrs. Smith, my first questions are for you. I understand that your city has been using chatbots in your engagements with your citizens. What impact has this had on the labor force, employees of the city?
The impact on our labor force in Kelowna, we believe, has been a positive one for both city staff and our customers. And I'll give an example that's not a planning and development example. It's a snow removal example, maybe a more Canadian example. We implemented a chat bot on our snow removal line. So every winter, when we get a snow event, we get thousands of phone calls related to questions about when snow will be removed on my street. And we employed staff that would respond to those questions in overtime sort of functions, and would again be answering the same question over and over and over. Using the artificial intelligence tool, we have a voice-driven chatbot now that can look at data from our snow plows and data that we have related to priority of snow plowing and snow plow routes, and be able to tell our residents when their street was last plowed and when it's likely to be plowed again. So we're reducing the number of calls that those frontline staff have, and then they're able to answer the calls from the public and spend the time on the ones that are more emergency related and more technical, rather than the ones that are related to purely when is my street going to be plowed. So
Merci, Monsieur Smith. J'ai pas beaucoup.
Thank you, Mrs. Smith. I don't have a lot of time. I have another question. What has happened to those who used to provide that information to citizens? Now you are using chatbots and AI, so citizens are talking to someone who is not physically present. So what has happened to those employees? How has the nature of work changed? Has there been job losses? If so, have you used those employees elsewhere? So what has been the impact on employees when it comes to number of jobs, requirements for other positions? That's my question.
This has reduced the amount of time that our employees, the amount of overtime they need to work during those snow events. And outside of that time, allowed us to repurpose those employees to respond to more complicated questions from the public. And so they're still doing similar jobs, but not answering the same questions over and over. They're able to respond to those residents with more complicated calls and questions that our chatbots weren't able to answer. So they're, in essence, again, doing higher value tasks, but in very similar roles.
Est-ce que dans ce processus,
In this change process, were employees associated to the solutions? You've talked about the value added to their jobs. Were employees afraid? Did they show you any limits that had to be respected in their work? Thank you.
When the city of Kelowna first announced in our development process the fact that we would begin trying to develop and use chatbots, there was definitely some fear and angst amongst employees. But I believe as we've explained more about the projects and how we'll be potentially using AI as a helper, not as a replacement, employees are starting to get on board. And I'll give an example why. I have a planning team that writes reports to City Council, and an average council report might take 6 or 8 hours for a planner to write. But a lot of the information is technical, and you're going to find the same policies or similar policies over and over and over again. And what the AI tool will allow them to do is create those reports more quickly and spend more time negotiating with a developer or a home builder to improve the quality of the project, and less time actually writing reports about the project. So we believe that there'll be a quality gain in the type of development that we do. And as staff learn this and learn that they're going to have more time to do this, I believe that their support for the tools will grow.
donc, il n'y a pas eu de...
So there was no job losses. Is that what you're saying? did the nature of the jobs change? Or did you have to change job positions, those who receive people, those who drafted some reports? I understand that it's an administrative task that will now be done by a chatbot. So all this did not have any impact on staff, and there was no reduction in staff numbers. Am I correct?
That's correct. We have not reduced staff numbers.
Thank you. Merci, Madame Shabat. Madame Zerillo for 6 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I'm going to direct my questions to the Competition Bureau initially, and I am going to want to talk about workers and how the Competition Board would intersect with workers. But I wanted to start just with the discussion that we've been having today and how important it is to have access to the internet and to have access to broadband internet. And we know already the Shaw and Rogers merger has caused a lot of problems for people. The connectivity is no longer available where it used to be. It's not as good of a service. So I just wonder if you wouldn't mind sharing, how are we going to protect as government here when things like this happen? Because if we are going to get into an AI world where we are really relying on that connectivity every single day for output, that I guess we're measuring people's productivity on some kind of output that's not related to their well-being, I guess. Could you just let me know what can be done with Shaw and Rogers right now to increase the connectivity, to make sure that people have the same standard of service and that we are ready for AI?
So thank you very much for the question. With respect to the Rogers-Shaw transaction, that is one that the Competition Bureau challenged, sought to block before the courts. We ultimately failed in that endeavor, and the merger was allowed to close. But it's one where I guess our perspective is competitive markets are critical, not only in terms of ensuring affordability for broadband services, but also ensuring that there's incentives to invest and continued investment to bring broadband services in communities across Canada. We will continue to prioritize the telecom sector at the Bureau, recognizing its importance. And one area is also how we can intervene in regulatory processes, such as we are presently doing with the CRTC, to make sure that we bring evidence and facts to bear about how to promote competitive markets, competitive broadband markets. So I think we will continue to have our enforcement role and review mergers or any anti-competitive conduct. But right now we're focused and currently involved in regulatory proceedings to try and bring to bear our competition perspective on how we can increase competition in broadband markets, and particularly the wholesale access regime.
So that's very interesting to me, and it's because the city of Coquitlam, my riding, has their own owned black fiber, and it's always been an issue that it hasn't been, like small ISPs could not be competitive in that market with the wholesale pricing at CRTC. So I would be very appreciative of any information that you could share with myself and the city of Coquitlam in that. Just wanted to go back to the proactive nature of the work that you do. So on the Shaw-Rogers merger, like, it's my understanding that there's really no statute of limitations on being able to review mergers. Is that correct? Or is there a limit when the Competition Board could no longer review mergers? Like, can you review it in a year, 5 years?
So there is a statute of limitations, which is 1 year. So that is currently the case. I will point out that there is a very comprehensive review of Canada's competition law undergoing right now. It's a review where we participated, the Competition Bureau, and provided a number of recommendations to how to modernize and strengthen our law, including the merger review process. So we made over 50 recommendations to the government to how to improve the Competition Act, and this is an ongoing process right now, and obviously with bills before Parliament as well.
Yes, we have one before Parliament today, the NDP does, in relation to the Grocery Industry and Competition Act. Okay, I wanted to move to workers. So my interest in this study is to understand the protection of workers and how perhaps the Competition Board would interact with that. And I know earlier in your comments you mentioned about benefits for workers. Like, I'm really trying to understand how this is going to affect workers, and I'm going to put a little lens on it. I'm very concerned that a person's personal IP, which now is being called cognitive property, can be captured and scaled and used over and over again, and they get no royalties, they get nothing from it. And even when we spoke today, the member from the witness from Kelowna, which I found that fascinating, you know, we're making people's intelligence redundant, and how do we protect workers from that? Of being able to use their IP, their personal, do we need to trademark ourselves? What do we need to do to make sure we get royalties for our ideas, for our intelligence?
It's a very interesting question. I think our expertise really lies in assessing the competition issues in that respect. IP is a relevant issue in competition circles because you can exercise an IP right, which might exclude certain people from a market. So there are different considerations at play that really depend on each fact. In terms of protecting workers in particular, you know, obviously our position is that competition amongst employers helps employees, helps them get higher wages, better working conditions. I will note that earlier this year, an important new provision to the Competition Act came into effect, which basically criminalized wage fixing and no poach agreements between employers. And that was certainly an important change to protect workers from anti-competitive conduct that can hurt their wages.
Thank you so much.
1 minute, it's gone. Thank you. Now, Ms. Falk for 5 minutes, please.
Thank you very much, and thank you to the witnesses for being here today and sharing your perspective. To the Competition Bureau, it was briefly mentioned that of the entrenchment of dominant players in the use of artificial intelligence. So I'm just wondering from the Bureau's perspective, is the artificial intelligence sector an open competitive space, or is it monopolized by a few companies?
I mean, it's a fascinating question. It's probably one that's pretty difficult to give a good answer on for this reason. It's a developing industry and it's developing markets. And I think what you're seeing now is a number of players that are getting into the space, that are involved in the space, that are quite big. And where that goes, you know, you have to see. At the same time, there are smaller players that are also innovating in that space and creating stuff. And it's a little bit of having to see how that plays out. Our laws are non-interventionist by nature. That's the kind of the design of it. It's the concept that the markets will sort themselves out, or if they can sort themselves out, we should leave them to do that as best they can. So it's a little bit of wait and see how the market develops. There are big players that have a lot of a strong presence with respect to the critical inputs to AI, things like computational power, data.
Do you have examples of companies?
Well, you see the big names that everybody knows is involved in AI space, like Meta, Alphabet, Google. Those names are very much at the forefront of this. But as I said, the market is developing. So how that plays out and ultimately where kind of the strong positions within that market comes is a little bit of a wait.
So in that developing space, would you say that Canadian businesses are developing well or competing well in that space?
So honestly, I'm not sure that that's something that we can answer. Okay. We engage in efforts to look at industries from the perspective of horizon scanning to understand them so that when competition issues arise, we're well placed to address them. But without any kind of indications of competitive issues that fall within the framework of our Act, you know, we're not doing a comprehensive assessment of all of the players in that market.
So would the Bureau say that the Canadian regulatory system is impacting their competitive positioning, being Canadian businesses?
I don't think there's any evidence to suggest that it's impacting one way or another. I will say this. One of our roles is to advocate to government for pro-competitive rules and regulations, because government can create barriers to industries. One area where we would advise in these new nascent states, as an example, is to make sure that any new regulations don't unduly impact smaller players, because they can be disproportionate. So if you're going to regulate, smaller players have much less resources they can devote to compliance and to the regulatory regime. So that's an important area where I think we would advise governments at all levels, if you're going to regulate AI, be mindful of the potential undue burden on smaller players to make sure that, you know, it's as level a playing field as can be in the sector.
For sure, thank you. Chair, with my remaining time, I would like to pass it on to MP Aitchison.
1 minute.
That's all I need, Mr. Chair. I actually have a motion that I'd like to move today that, given that the Bank of Canada, the Governor of the Bank of Canada recently remarked that supply shortages in our housing market are boosting prices for shelter, the committee concur in the Governor's remarks and report them to the House.
Thank you, Mr. Aitchison. Mr. Fragas-Catos, we've suspended the time on the questioning. Mr. Aitchison's motion was in order, so I had to recognize it. Mr. Fragas-Catos.
And very quickly,
because
we do have witnesses here, Mr. Chair. As Mr. Aitchison knows, this will prompt a concurrence debate in the House, and I suspect very strongly is meant to distract and take time away from the government's legislative agenda. For that reason, the Liberal side will not be supporting the motion.
Ms. Gray, on the motion.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Well, for Canadians, there is little else that is more important than the housing crisis that we're having in Canada, and any discussions that we can have on the housing crisis that we're having is incredibly important. And so that's why we're bringing this motion forth, so that we can continue to have meaningful discussions and debates in the House of Commons on the housing crisis in Canada.
Thank you. Ms. Ferrari, on the motion.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And just to my colleague, Mr. Fragas-Catos' comment, even if what you said was true, that this would be a distraction or a concurrence issue, you are the government. The biggest issue, without a doubt, is housing. This motion is saying, hey, we listen to you, Canadians. We know that things are bad, and we're going to do something about it. The Royal Bank of Canada report published last week estimates around $900 billion worth of mortgages at Canadian chartered banks. Roughly 60% of outstanding mortgages on their books will renew between 2024 and 2026. Depending on the path of interest rates, the average monthly payment on these mortgages could jump 32% next year and as much as 48% in 2026, the report estimates. So, Mr. Chair, my point of saying this, there is politics in this place, 100%. But if you are not getting the emails, the phone calls, the messages of despair and suffering that we are, I don't know whether you're not answering your phone or what, but this is of the utmost urgency. And our witnesses today talking about AI, do you know where we're sitting in productivity in Canada? Like that. And that's going to hurt our mortgages. That's going to hurt people. This is all downloaded to Canadians who have otherwise never paid attention to politics in their life. So I urge you, I actually am making eye contact with you to urge you to pass this motion. Because honestly, I came here because people were suffering. You came to Peterborough. I hope you went to Wolfe Street. I hope you saw the people in encampments. Yeah. And I hope you watch social media. I hope you see what is happening to people. They can't feed their families. Yes, there's politics, fine. But we have a duty because we were elected to serve people. Please pass this motion. Thank you.
As a point of order,
sur la motion.
Mr. Chair, just as a point of order, are we talking about the supply shortage comment by the Auditor Generals? Okay. because the comments previously were about the other motion that was proposed. So
Thank
just
you,
wanted to be
Mr.
clear on which motion we're
Thank you,
speaking
Mr.
to. Thank you.
Van Bynen. Madame Chabot, sur la motion.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I received my answer otherwise. I had the same question. We know that Conservatives tabled 2 motions. Now you're referring to 1 motion. Which one are you referring to? Because I did not hear the title. Furthermore, from midday, when we are done with our witnesses, we will have 1 hour to discuss our committee business. So is it possible to discuss that at midday?
Merci, Madame.
Thank you, Madam Chabot.
Mr. Aitchison moved a motion in his time allotment. I have to allow the motion to be discussed and voted on. Madame Zarrillo, you have the floor on the motion.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I'll just make sure that I am speaking to the right one. This is the one about the Governor of the Bank of Canada's remarks, correct? Yeah. So I've said before to my colleagues on this committee that I am more than happy to actually have the Governor come and speak about the impacts that the banks have had on the housing crisis. And I think about the fact that we have the Competition Bureau here today, and we know that the big banks in Canada are surprisingly aligned in mortgage rates in this country. And it's also, I know that many people were advised not to lock into their mortgages at the beginning of the year, last year when we saw the mortgage rates rising. And, you know, I feel strongly that this is about sales and sales targets. I know a number of people that work in the banking industry in Canada who every single morning are basically driven of like, you're meeting this sales target today, you're meeting this sales target today. And I think the banks have lost sight of serving consumers. And I certainly know many families in my riding that have had to change their living conditions because of these rising interest rates. So I'm sorry to say that I won't support this one, but I certainly would support having the Governor of the Bank of Canada come to this committee and be accountable for the fact that so many people can no longer afford their mortgage payments. And were they involved in making sure that people didn't lock in when they knew they were going to be raising interest rates over time?
Madame Zarrillo, Mr. Aitchison, on your motion.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I actually think that this could be an opportunity to start that process to get the Governor of the Bank of Canada here to our committee, and so I would encourage my colleague, Mr. Zarrillo, to actually support it. And I must say, I'm a little disappointed too to hear my colleague, Mr. Fragascato, say that, you know, a debate about the housing crisis in this country with new information from the Governor of the Bank of Canada causing a concurrence debate in the House of Commons is a waste of time. This is a crisis, and if the House of Commons is anything, it's got to be a place where regular Canadians' issues can be elevated and debated and discussed, and that's what I'm calling for. And frankly, I'm shocked that he would say that's a waste of time. So I'll call for a vote right now.
Thank you, Mr. Aitchison. Seeing no further speakers, you do, Mr. Fragascatos, on the motion.
Just quickly, Mr. Chair, the record is clear. I did at no point did I say it would be a waste of time. We debate these matters regularly, in fact, in the House of Commons, which only proves my point that this is political games on the part of my colleagues. But we'll move to the vote.
A vote's been called for. Seeing no further discussion, Mr. Clerk, a vote on the motion of Mr. Aitchison to call. You're all familiar with the motion you're voting on, so it's clear. Clerk.
Want me to read it?
Read it.
That given that the Governor of the Bank of Canada recently remarked that supply shortages in our housing market are boosting prices for shelter, the committee concur in the government's remarks and report them to the House.
Recorded vote.
Mr. Fragascatos?
No.
Mr. Long?
No.
Mr. Collins?
No.
Mr. Coteau?
No.
Mr. Van Bynen?
No.
Ms. Gray?
Yes.
Ms. Falk?
Yes.
Ms. Ferrari?
Yes.
Mr. Aitchison?
Yes.
Madame Chabot?
Oui.
Ms. Zarrillo.
Nope.
Yeas pour 5, nays contre 6.
Motion has been defeated. We'll return. There is 46 seconds left. Ms. Falk.
Thank you, Chair. So just to follow up on your last comments, has the Bureau identified any legislative policies that currently, if introduced, or like conversation of any that would negatively impact our small businesses, like you were saying, or even Canada's advantage within the AI sector?
No, I don't think we've identified any specific ones. I think because this continues to be a nascent space where people are examining the appropriate ways to regulate, I think these are principles that we would recommend that policymakers keep in mind to make sure that we are fostering a competitive ecosystem.
Perfect. Thank you.
Mr. Collins. Mr. Collins? Or is it?
I think it's. Is it Peter? Give it to you. Me? Okay, I'm good. No problem.
Mr. Collins,
Yep.
You have the floor. For 5
Thanks,
minutes.
Mr. Chair. And if I could to Mr. Smith, we've heard that with the change in the workforce, there is the whole issue related to training. And can I just ask, as the organization seeks to implement AI in different parts of the organization beyond some of those areas that you've highlighted for the committee, can you advise in terms of what the municipality is doing in terms of training employees either for job transformation or the whole issue related to job security? We've witnessed a lot of issues in the U.S. in terms of the United Auto Workers and employees striking to ensure that automation isn't replacing jobs in the workforce. We've witnessed, I think all of us have read with interest, at the heart of the Hollywood writers' strike, how AI impacted job security there and language as part of their collective agreements. And so can I ask as to, how is AI being communicated to the workforce? And what kind of training do you have in place that might prepare employees whose jobs may be impacted by AI? Can you elaborate on those issues for us?
Thank you for the question. So as one of the fastest growing municipalities in Canada right now, our experience may be a little bit different than others, but in a lot of areas of our operations, we have employees running at 115 to 130% of capacity, not to 80%. We're going to reduce them to 50% capacity. So as we start to deploy AI in different portions of our different business areas, we will watch and say, are there areas where we expect very transformational change? And if so, we're going to need to do some business planning about how that change impacts the workforce. But we also don't want to go and do that sort of planning in areas that are changing just a little bit, and we're taking employees back from 115% to 95%. That's kind of where we want them, so that they have time in their day for innovation and we're not burning people out. Our biggest challenge is that we believe we're burning people out and we can't onboard fast enough or with the right skill sets. And so, again, our experience may be different than other municipalities. To answer your question, though, in areas that would be impacted by greater levels of change, we will be implementing programs to either retrain or redeploy staff.
And that would lead me to the question of job satisfaction. So we did have a witness at our last meeting who talked about, with some of the improvements and innovation that comes with AI, it has led in some workplaces to increased job satisfaction. Are you seeing that with those who have been impacted in the areas where you've implemented AI? I think you've alluded to that a couple of times in your answers, but do you have anything with with satisfaction surveys, and I know it's early because you've just implemented AI in some of the areas of the organization, but any early results in terms of employees providing feedback as it relates to job satisfaction?
Yeah, I mean, I think the employees in some of the areas where we've deployed chatbots, whether it's at our airport or with our clerical staff who support our snow removals team, will report back and say our jobs are much better now that we're not answering that same question over and over and over during overtime shifts and in snow events. We can really get to the residents that have problems that matter and make sure that we're servicing those residents with the bulk of our time rather than those who have, again, the same question about when's my street going to be plowed. It's helping residents who have real issues like your plow plowed in my driveway and I can't get out and I have a work meeting or I have mobility issues. How can we deal with that? So again, kind of a uniquely Canadian example, but we believe that the satisfaction of those staff who can really make a difference in somebody's day go up.
Well, as a longtime councillor in the city of Hamilton, I'll be honest, I don't miss the plowed-in driveway calls here in Ottawa. Can I ask, in terms of the whole issue related to transparency and privacy issues with the public? You touched on that earlier in response to another question from one of my colleagues. As it's used more in our daily lives, and you know, there's the whole issue of security in airports and facial recognition. And we've seen some pushback from the public in terms of, you know, there's a line in terms of what they're willing to live with as it relates to being consumers and frequenting certain establishments in society, whether it be an airport or other areas. Can you advise in terms of where's that line in your municipality? Do you have a corporate policy in place yet in terms of where AI might be used when you're dealing with constituents and the day-to-day tasks of responding? In some cases, it's just providing basic information. Do you have a policy yet municipally that seeks to address where AI might be used in the organization in areas where you may not want to use it because there may not be public acceptance or buy-in yet?
A short answer, Mr. Smith, or maybe you could provide a written response to the committee. Your choice.
Yeah, I'll do a quick answer. Yes, we have a digital strategy that guides the areas of our operations where we believe there's opportunity for AI to make a difference in our citizens' lives. We haven't had much of any pushback yet in any of the areas where we've deployed AI tools. We believe that nobody wants to wait in line at City Hall or wait on hold for City Hall.
Thank you, Mr. Collins. Mr. Smith, Madame Chabot pour 2 minutes et demie.
Oui, merci beaucoup, Monsieur Dur.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Desrochers, considering your title, promotion of competition, considering that we are studying AI and its impact on the labor force, AI has started and it's not going to stop. So looking at the labor force, there are lots of challenges, ethics, surveillance, because the world will become more virtual. Working conditions in some sectors, particularly major sectors with 100 employees or more, will be more affected than the smaller enterprises. It would appear to me, but I would like to know what you think about it, it would appear that regulations would be positive instead of deregulation. I would like to know what you think about this. From the perspective of our labor market, should this sector be more regulated? Thank you for your question. Unfortunately, I cannot offer you an informed opinion because we are focusing on competition. But I think it's clear that, in part, the new AI technology will be adopted, in part because of competition, because there's going to be pressure from competitors to reduce cost or to provide innovative products on the market. And this is what is going to push for adoption of this technology. So we think it's important to make sure that the market stays competitive. And for employees, there should be no plotting to limit opportunities being offered to employees. Thank you. Unfortunately, there are situations like what we saw in Quebec in the telecommunications sector. Some sectors have been compromised, telecommunications, communication, and we have seen that they have been affected. And there's also the job issue. I understand that you do not have the expertise necessary to talk about the impact on jobs. But how can sound competition help to develop sectors instead of seeing those sectors disappear?
Ouais. Je dirais une saine concurrence est très importante.
I would say that sound competition is very important for the entire economy. We talked earlier about productivity. Competition plays an important role in stimulating the economy. 2 weeks ago, we published a report that studied competition in the Canadian economy, and reports have shown that competition intensity is slowing down over the past 20 years, and this is not a good sign when it comes to productivity in the country.
Madame Zerillo for 2.5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I've really enjoyed having the Competition Bureau here, and I hope that we can also have them to come another time, because we've been able to talk about telecoms, we've been able to talk about banks, we've been able to talk about grocery chains, lots of spaces where Canadians are suffering right now and need more competition. And I think about the growing privatization of healthcare too, really concerns me. But at this point in time, I'm going to take a minute just on airlines, and I have a motion, Mr. Chair.
Rillo, before you do, because if you introduce it now, it's non-debatable at this moment because it wasn't received in time.
Okay.
But it would be debatable if you want to move it under committee business. It's your choice.
Okay, but are we going in camera for committee business?
Yes.
Well, then I'll read it out now, and then we can debate it another day.
It's your time. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So the motion is, and I've sent it to the clerk, that given multiple recent reports of persons with disabilities facing discrimination and unacceptable treatment while traveling with Air Canada, and that Air Canada admitted it violated Canadian disability regulations, that pursuant to Standing Order 1082, the Standing Committee on Human Resources, Skills and Social Development and the Status of Persons with Disabilities invite Air Canada CEO Michael Russo as soon as possible to committee for a minimum of 1 hour to explain these violations related to persons with disabilities and how they will rectify this situation, that a report of this meeting be prepared and presented to the House, and that, pursuant to Standing Order 109, the government table a comprehensive response to the report and explain how they will rectify this situation. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Madame Zerillo. It's been moved, but it's not debatable at this time, so you still have roughly 45 seconds of your time.
Well, I hope I can talk to you another time about the airlines, but right now I wanted to talk about something I believe Madame Chabot brought it up. So right now, Microsoft already holds a lot of embedded knowledge and data. They already hold that. There's many large players that already hold that embedded data. And I heard Mr. Smith from Kelowna say that right now, all of the intelligence that they're gathering from their staff in Kelowna is going to be free to everybody out there. What I'm worried about is Microsoft is also gathering that data from what's happening in Kelowna. Are they going to be sharing that data for free, or are they going to be using that data to create something similar to maybe what Kelowna is doing, or go wider into the United States and across the world? And then how does the Kelowna city, who owns that IP and that IC, get compensation for that? I'm interested what you think about that. And
a short answer, gentlemen, whoever wants to do it.
The short answer is that, open markets lead to better competition. And while it's true that large players have a lot of data, and that will be beneficial for them in competing in burgeoning markets like AI, that principle of open competition is what we'll always be advocating for. That's really all we can say.
Thank you, Madame Zerillo. Thank you to the witnesses for appearing today on this very important, evolving topic. Thank you, Mr. Smith, Mr. DeRochier, Monsieur DeRochier, Mr. McKay. At this moment, we will suspend while the committee goes in camera for committee business. We'll suspend for
3 minutes.
3 minutes. Suspend.
you.